just most people's just want to be average, right? And if you want to take an extra step, right, like you got to get out of that comfort zone and do different things. And so, my approach has always been to, out hustle, outwork. I've always felt like maybe I wasn't not necessarily the best salesperson, but I put myself up against anyone else because I was willing to outwork and put in the time and effort.
Welcome to the episode of the Profitable Property Management Podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Moyla, and I'm here with Bob Hansen. My man, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, stoked to jam with you. You and I have known each other for a minute now. How long have you been in the industry for?
Man, I've been in the industry 20 plus years, not to age myself. Yeah, 20, maybe 21.
And what were the jumps for you?
First gig was part of apartments.com. We launched a single family website called Rental Homes Plus. So that's kind of where I got my first start. Got to know a lot of people in the NARPM crowd. Did that for a couple of years, got it to a couple $1 million in revenue. And the natural progression from there was like you're coming up off the bench into the big leagues, into the apartments.com team that had scaled, to a much bigger position within the company. Did that for several more years, went through the CoStar acquisition, moved out to the West Coast, came back to the Midwest, and eventually moved on from there to the Home Partners of America role. Learned a lot about property management, going from 400 to almost 20,000 doors prior to my exit. Learned enough that I was a salesperson masquerading as a head of operations. I learned enough that I need to get back into the sales side because the property management game is not for the weary. It's a lot of work, and I appreciate those that do it. I'd rather be on the vendor side of it, helping them navigate through some of those challenges. And when I was there, I got to know Thad and crew at Second Nature, and really saw an opportunity for our company at the time to utilize the filter program. It was Filter Easy at the time, and didn't quite get it over the hump when I was there. We were looking at a couple other things, but I thought, man, this is a truly unique thing, and I see the value in it because HVAC repairs and maintenance were one of our leading, indicators on spend and what we were doing, and a way to drive that down was something we needed to do. And when I was looking to get back in, Thad gave me a shot, came over, and 6-year run at Second Nature, which just is winding down and getting started with VeriFast, getting into the screening, fraud mitigation kind of sector. So
you've worked on multifamily, single family side,
Yeah.
Worked at it from a bunch of different angles, but the focus and emphasis for you has been around sales. And that's a big part of what I wanted to talk to you about today.
Sure, yeah.
Your approach and your philosophy of how you think about what makes for an effective versus an average seller.
Yeah. I don't know, I played football through college. I reffed football. I coached football. So I'll use a lot of football analogies. And I think Nick Saban says it best. People are there, most people's just want to be average, right? And if you want to take an extra step, right, like you got to get out of that comfort zone and do different things. And so, my approach has always been to, out hustle, outwork. I've always felt like maybe I wasn't not necessarily the best salesperson, but I put myself up against anyone else because I was willing to outwork and put in the time and effort. So I think, that's the first key part, right? Is making sure that you're dialed in and spending a lot of time, at your craft. Second component is, probably, truthful to a fault, right? Like be open, be honest. Don't give people, BS answers just to make yourself look better in that situation because people can see through it. And, network, I felt like networking and being kind and being good to people and delivering on what you're saying has benefited me. And so I really try to emphasize to other people coming through or people looking at sales to really build a solid network and make sure you kind of foster that. I'm probably a person that doesn't have a best friend, but I got a lot of really, really great friends, that I can count on. And it's from, keeping in touch with people and not just calling them when you need something, right? If you're calling someone when you need it, people see right through that too. If you're genuinely, taking time to reach out to people, check in on their family, their life, how's work doing, how can I help you? I've always felt that benefits you too as well. So
let's dive a little deeper on some of those and specifically talk about qualification and understanding the problem set. Like at each of these companies, you have a thing that you're selling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you hope that it matches up with what people need, but the reality is you don't know for sure. The fact that somebody is in the right demographic doesn't mean that you actually understand their pain. What is the approach that you've seen be most effective to understand and diagnose need beyond just surface level, they're in my demographic?
Yeah, I think over time, like maybe in sales, you kind of, with anything, you kind of craft your sword a little bit more. You sharpen the iron. I was probably like a feature salesperson. Like, here's the product. Here's what we got. You should just buy because it's great. Along the line, just start picking up different techniques, reading more books, gap selling, Keenan, stuff like that, like discovery, right? I look at Second Nature, did a lot of good stuff at Second Nature.
Mustang method.
Yeah, so really just kind of understanding what the pain is, right? And taking someone from their current state to the future state, right? And you only get good by asking, real questions and really listening to people. And so that's something that's really, I think, helped my game over time, is finding out the pain first and then trying to solve with the solution that we had.
And what about finding some false pain? What about like an initial answer that actually isn't the thing? Have you ever sold a deal, gotten pretty far down the road and found that you were somewhat misled, that what you were told the pain was not enough to actually get over the hump?
Yeah, I think that's certainly happened. It doesn't, I don't really have a lot of specifics like that come to mind, but certainly, when you go through like an onboarding, like, wait, this isn't what you told me, and sometimes that causes friction, because I think the buyer thinks you've sold them on X, product, and they think they're getting more out of it. I guess I had someone the other day that signed an agreement, told me, they basically walked out of the deal after they told me they were the decision maker, and they had to go back to an owner, right? And he was like, "Yeah, I feel like I was sold a bill of goods. This isn't what we thought we were buying." And I was like, my response to him was like, "Man," and he doesn't know my connections in the space and not someone's involved in NARPM or some of these other groups. And I was like, you could ask anyone coast to coast that knows me. Like, the last thing that happened is me selling you a bill of goods. You know what I mean? Like, and it's great now that you have recordings. I'm like, I can send you this recording. And he kind of walked it back. He goes, well, maybe I just didn't, maybe I didn't really understand. And ultimately, I'm not the decision maker. I'm like, okay, right. So I think that, maybe that comes to mind on your question there.
Yeah. So you've also, in addition to doing selling, you've also done sales management, correct?
Yeah. I mean, most of my career has been sales management. I think probably, I call it 20 of the 22 years in sales have been mostly on the management side. It's just recent that on the Second Nature side, as we look to get more into multifamily, I stepped out of running the sales team for about a year and going selling directly and getting us into the multifamily space. In this role here, I'm kind of coming in really selling and then building the team out as we grow. But I've come to like really enjoy that sales process again, and the fun and the freedom and the chasing of the deal, versus the managing of it. I've always kind of jumped in and helped out probably a little bit too much than I should have, like hijacking a call and trying to show a rep versus letting reps make mistakes. So I think in the back of my mind, like I've always I love being on the front end of things and trying to make a deal happen.
What was the difference in the motion pressing into multifamily versus SFR?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different. I feel like in the SFR space, it's a little bit easier to get to a person that can make a decision. There's not as many layers to peel back. I mean, sure, as you go up in scale and size, there's a lot more people got to be brought into the decision-making process, or at least looped in on, what's my company purchasing and how is this going to impact me? On the multifamily side, I think just the scale is bigger. There's a lot more layers to kind of peel back. So the sales cycle is a lot longer, right? Which, I'm sure every salesperson loves a quick sales cycle, right? The longer one, you just got to kind of stick with it, and you got to be persistent, but not annoying, right? To kind of keep that deal and cycle and flow. More competition on certain products from what we were selling that existed in the multifamily space. So really just kind of triaging like through and asking those discovery questions to kind of get to, your ultimate opportunity and like what products I could provide to them.
What about need and pain? How did the need landscape vary?
Yeah, I feel like the pain is similar. The need,
The concept of a resident benefits program package, etc., that hasn't caught fire in multifamily in general,
right.
which tells you something about need. What was
Yeah.
the inference? What's your read on that?
I feel like people think that they have a good resident experience, but they're kind of like piecing it together where our approach was like bundle it up, package it as one. There's a lot of like like the term fee maximization, I feel like sticks out a little bit more in multifamily because there's a fee for everything. And our approach had always been, hey, bundle it up, make sure that there's so much value for, we talk triple win a lot at Second Nature. So there's got to be enough value for the resident. There's got to be enough value for the investor. And there's got to be enough value for the operator, right? And that came with us working with operators, getting some of the best pricing opportunity out there so that when you go to market, right, the value is there for the resident. On the multifamily side, I don't know if they're looking at it the same exact way as the SFR clients had. And that was a challenge, right? To kind of get them to see the true value and how this could help with retention and could help drive additional revenues, right, for that management company, how it could be a benefit for an investor if, because a lot of times they're just thinking like, oh, pay me more money in my rent, right, on that $20 versus mitigating HVAC issues and saving them, thousands of dollars on replacements, right? The owner of the property isn't always thinking in the same light that perhaps the owner on the SFR side is, or it's just easier to have a conversation with an operator who has 1 to 3 properties that a clientele in the SFR space might be managing versus the operator who's got, hundreds to thousands of units that they're managing for, right? So
arguably the multifamily setup lends itself more so to logistical ease around these types of programs, right? I mean,
you would think, yeah.
200 units, 10 layouts.
Yeah.
There's just fundamentals. Filters is a great example,
sure.
right? I mean, the sizing of the filters is more or less a known quantity.
Yep.
And yet we haven't fully seen it catch the same level of adoption over there. Maybe it'll happen at some point in the future. Time will tell.
I mean, the filter thing was interesting because for a while, like I had a team that was on the commercial side, and this is like pre-COVID, where we were going in and we're trying to sell just filters into multifamily, just filters into commercial buildings. And you'd find a lot of times in multifamily that they were using an inexpensive, fiberglass filter that's 99 cents and not protecting the system whatsoever. But it was because it was that low cost. They're like, oh, well, I can't go from $1 to, $3, right? I just can't make that happen. Yet if their system broke down, right, they're already spending thousands upon thousands of dollars. So,
oh gosh.
Right.
So you're saying that the owner operator, when the cost burden was fully on them, the way they valued it wasn't necessarily congruent with buying a high quality filter.
Correct.
It was just short-term versus long-term thinking.
Yeah. I mean, they were, in that time, right, the multifamily assets were changing hands a lot quicker than they are in today's landscape. And so I think in my mind was like, the idea was like, oh, we kind of kick the can down the road and
somebody
the next guy's got to deal with
it.
it. You know what I mean? Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, and then in commercial, it kind of took off and COVID really expanded upon that. You wanted to call and highlight that, hey, our building's got a MERV 13, MERV 16 filter. We're pulling out droplet nuclei, right? You can't and that's the stuff that like catches the COVID and all the stuff that the people were talking about back then. And so they wanted to highlight it and they wanted to put it on their front door. And that was like a call to action to kind of get people back into the buildings. And so you felt like you're really kind of helping out there, but the underlying component was like you should be changing your filters anyways. In the commercial space, they do it a lot better than the multifamily space has. So.
How did the sale change for the sellers that were reporting to you over time with Second Nature as the product mix expanded? What became different and what challenges presented themselves for a multi-SKU sale?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more complicated in a sense. You got to know your stuff a little bit more. You can't just go out there and, just from just selling a filter, right? People got pretty comfortable in knowing that product line. a lot more dynamics, especially as it came to, insurance. How does that work? The credit building, right? The different laws, right? Second Nature did a really good job of hiring legal staff to get more involved and understand the landscapes in all the states across the country, right? So as a business, we had to evolve, we had to professionalize, right? We had to do more trainings and really understand product a lot better, ask a lot better discovery questions as well too.
You've been through that professionalization per se at multiple companies. People relate to it in different ways, and it really does impact the culture. Some people experience it as professionalization. Other people experience it as selling out, and now we can't do all the fun stuff we used to do, etc. What have you seen and experienced in just the natural stuff that happens to every company as it goes from a small casual operation to something big?
Yeah, I think it's like the more you go through it, right, the less, I don't know, the less worrisome it is, right? Like, I mean, to me, if you're a good employee, right, and you're enjoying what you're doing, you're used to making an X dollar, like you're always going to have an opportunity wherever it's going to be, right? Companies are going to scale, they're going to grow, right? And so if you're a salesperson and you're salesperson, 1 through 5, and in order for a company to scale, you're going to go to salesperson 50, right? And territory gets chopped up, and everyone thinks like, oh, there's not enough stuff to call on. Well, 5 years later, when you're rep 50, there's still enough to call on, right? So I think once you understand that that's just the evolution of a good company that's growing, you should get excited about it. It's a little bit easier to get excited if you got some equity in it, and you want to grow the pie, and your return is at the end. And I think if you're looking to be in the startup space, like you should get excited about growth, right? And making it more challenging for a landscape for sales reps in terms of, who I can go after, who's available to sell. At the same time, like a company like Second Nature, when you're adding more products, you can always upsell, right? So that's the beautiful thing is you get more clientele on, they're used to certain products. It's a lot easier to upsell someone than to bring a new client on. So
it directly relates to territories, right? You're talking about more revenue from the same customers. Therefore, chopping territory shouldn't necessarily impact things. Let's stay on this theme of sales management. Talk to me a little bit about sales incentive, sales comp. What have you learned is effective and not effective at the various tours of duty you've been in?
Yeah. I think you gotta pay people appropriately. I feel wherever I've been, you're probably not, it's probably not, you're not getting paid the most. You're definitely not getting paid the least. You're getting paid fairly adequate for what you're doing, right? And if people can understand that they can continue to make more and more money based upon their performance, right? Like not having a cap. Right? I know people have worked at companies where you get capped out. I don't understand that. I'm sure there's a reason why it happens, but if you're growing a business, especially an early stage company, you want to give the people the opportunity to make as much money they can. And that usually results in, how much can you sell? How quickly can you onboard? I think as you talk about onboarding, right? You can't just go, at Second Nature, you couldn't just go sell a product and move on, right? You were responsible for making sure that there was the onboarding, and so that goes back to asking good questions and dialing in and making sure people know exactly what they're getting because you want them to roll out successfully. Things I've learned over time, don't run out an incentive just to pay out a winner, right? Have some skin in the game, so maybe kind of do some non-company sponsored, right, incentives where there's just a company payout. It's like, hey, if a rep wants to hey, let's all throw in $20 and the winner gets this, and if you don't, you lose, right? Because you're probably at the end of the day, when someone really gets out in front, the people in the back probably aren't putting in that extra effort and you still got time, right, to go through this contest. So I think as long as you can keep people in the game till the end so that you're getting ultimate performance from people, incentivizing them a little bit more, you're going to get better outcomes.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm asking about. Sales games, gimmick, spiff, accelerator.
Yeah.
Money is fungible. So to some degree, this is just shuffling the same dollars around, but it speaks to motivation, engagement, and asking folks to pay attention to specific areas of the business. So part of what I'm intuiting from what you're saying is that you did see game setups, competitive dynamics actually yield a change in behavior that was desired.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I'm always a fan of competition, and so I always try to find little ways to make it fun. I coach an 8U tackle football team right now, right? And football's a little bit different today than it was when I played, right? Where coaches were grabbing your face mask and yelling at you and no, you can't get water. Now it's like more water than you probably even need. But instead of just like running kids, I say like, let's go we'll have a relay race, and it's a 20-yard sprint around something. You're tagging guys, and you're pairing half the team up against half the team. And jokingly around, I asked one of my kids the other day, like, hey, what should we do in practice again? And they're like, more relay races. So, you're getting, they're having fun doing it, but you're also delivering the same outcome of getting them ready for games. So I think that lends itself in sales as well. Like, do things that are fun for people to get, a positive outcome. And it makes that culture, people get excited. They rally around it. Things like president's clubs also help. I was fortunate at apartments.com to be part of many president's clubs, and we did some really cool things. At Second Nature, we took it to another level. When you got Thad at the helm and he's planning where you're going, and you're going to places like Iceland or, Tulum or Banff, places that I probably would have never thought about going myself. But you go there and it's just so cool, so fun. So people get excited about that. People work extra to hit their number to go on a trip that, they probably could afford themselves if they really wanted to. But it's just a nice thing that that might be the biggest goal for them all year is like, I hit my number, I go to President's Club, and then you talk about it.
I love this idea of the President's Club. Tell me more. I'm assuming this is not a participation trophy. There's an objective threshold. Is it feasible for everybody to make President's Club? Typically, what percentage of the sales force is making it or qualifying? Tell me more about what
I mean, at different places, President's Club is usually for the sales side. I think oftentimes there's also an at Bay winner or someone that you could bring in that's done some remarkable things that isn't just directly on the sales side. I've seen that at different organizations, but usually most of the makeup is people on the sales team. Usually it's like a 2 or 3 day trip. Some people extend and pay stuff on their own for a couple extra days. But it's really getting the team together. You find an excursion, you do something different each day. I would say if I look back from the ones that we did at Second Nature, probably top 10% were making the cut. Only a couple of sales reps were going. So we'd have groups of, eight people total with a significant other coming with you. Kind of mimic the same when I was at Apartments. We would do with cars.com too. So it'd be a big group of people. There'd be about 40, 50 folks going to just an all-inclusive hotel. I do love the fact that when we were at Second Nature in a small group, you're going to kind of more, I don't know if exotic's the right word, but like, a really cool
special
16-person house, like your own beach, your own pool, an excursion out on the golf course one day, jet skis the other day, fun stuff. So,
and where was the threshold to qualify relative to quota?
You had to hit your your annual quota.
Got it. So that was it. This is the reward for hitting annual quota.
Yeah, your reward for annual quota. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it accelerated every year, right? Numbers would keep going up. So,
and how did you see folks relate to it in terms of like at a certain point throughout the year, you kind of know how your year is gonna go. Did you see folks like chasing it up until?
Yeah.
Was it so? It was motivating for folks like throughout the year, as opposed to checking out if they had a couple bad quarters out of the gate.
Totally, yeah. I mean, I think there's always an opportunity. You're never too far out of the game. Yeah, you can put yourself in a hole, but you go put in those extra reps, you do the extra work. Sometimes you get a little bit lucky too. I mean, I've always felt like you create your luck. Making that extra dial, making that extra outreach, going to that extra conference. You may just get someone that you find right time, right place, right time, and you get a sale from it. But for the most part, I think people do kind of pace themselves. They're usually, in the running and they can kind of see the finish line at the beginning of the year and pacing through that. But certainly at the end of the year, fourth quarter, going into, the end of the year, December, people taking vacations, holidays coming up. You got people working on Fridays late trying to close a deal, and putting that extra effort. So it's a benefit to the business, and it's a nice outcome for those that do make it and get to attend the event.
What's the hardest sale you ever closed?
Oh man. Well, this is a great, I guess, the hardest one. There was my early on at Rental Homes Plus, there was a company out there, a Texas-based company. They're my friends now. They're still in the industry, to a degree. One Prop, Kevin
Dave
Martin,
Cadillac.
David Cadillac, Charles Riska, those guys. Wouldn't say it was the hardest one, but I think I had a call on them like 10 times before they finally said yes. It was like I kept on, it kept going. And then several years later, Kevin Martin, one of the owners, called me up and said, "Hey man, I know you're a Chicago guy, but wanting to hire you for a long time. You're out there in California. We're managing these doors for a REIT that's out of Chicago. They're going to scale. They got a property management company in Chicago, Denver, and Dallas. We're going to do a JV. We're going to bring you in. Like, how about you come over and run operations? We'll teach you everything." And so, like, my hardest sell early on, and it wasn't like, I don't know, it was just more of like, come on, this is a good fit. You should do this.
Yeah.
They just kept telling me no, but we're friendly, and I just kept like hanging out with them, and they were cool people to spend time with. And I'm like, come on, let's do this. And finally, one day, they made it happen, and then fast forward many years later, opportunity to like work with those guys. So I think that was probably one of the cooler things that I've experienced in my career.
Yeah. So you sold them and then they sold you on joining.
Yeah. Many years later.
Circle.
Yeah.
How did that experience on the operations side inform the rest of your career after that? It's rare to have folks go back and forth.
Yeah. It's the operations thing, I learned a lot. It's weird for me. I mean, I'm a pretty confident person, but hopefully I come off as like a humble person. Like I don't feel like, I want to be a humble person. You know what I mean? And so I try to use that as an advantage when I'm talking to someone like, "Hey, I've managed 18,000 units as SVP of operations."
You just dropped that.
But it sounds like I always feel weird when I say it, but I feel like I've been in your seat. I'm just trying to I'm not just some other salesperson trying to sell you a product because I want to make money and feed my family. Like I've been in your shoes. I understand your pain. And at that scale, like that pain is even more so. Like I just, I tell people like joking around, like when it was the filters, I'm like, I always know it's the HVAC goes out on 4th of July holiday, and you get through every layer of property management until you get to the top. And now it's 10 o'clock and I'm taking a phone call where I should be hanging out with my family or my kids. And it was a bad, it's just a tough experience because people want their air fixed fast and they want it resolved quickly, or, it's either that or the mold. Those are the two things. Like I don't get triggered, but those are the two things I remember from property management: mold issues, HVAC. So like I feel like I just want to relate to them. It's helped me understand. It helps me have better conversations. Now that I'm at VeriFast and doing the screening and the fraud mitigation, I mean, there's numerous times where we've had to do the Cash for Keys program at Home Partners, or, in Chicago, you get a bad actor that knows the game, right? You stop paying your rent in September, and then in October you get the writ from the judge and you can evict them, but then the sheriff's not going to go and knock on the door until April because in Cook County, you don't evict people when it's cold outside. Well, that impacts your business. It impacts your investors. And so I like to let people know that I've been in your shoes, so yeah, but it feels weird to like say that, to drop that. But I definitely feel more prepared to have a conversation, knowing with most of the operators I'm talking to, like having gone through probably what they're experiencing.
I've managed 18,000 doors. It sounds handy.
Yeah.
It's a handy reference point for sure. It makes sense.
And when I say 18th, I mean, I had a lot of people that handled it, not me.
Yes, Bob.
Right.
We know you.
Yeah.
You had a team under you.
Right. Great team, amazing team, and they made me look good. So, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing now. Your latest jump is to move to a company called VeriFast.
VeriFast. Mm-hmm.
Give me some basic layout of what the product offering is and why it made sense for you to make the move.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really looking for an opportunity whatsoever. Very happy, great company, second nature. I just think sometimes opportunities come around that it's like tough to say no to, and got to meet the crew out on the circuit, the IMN conference circuit. Got to know Tim, the founder, Jean, our SVP of sales. Just great people, like good culture. Reminds me a lot of like the second nature culture and just good folks. So that was the main thing. 2 was like a great opportunity. And then 3 was the product. If the product wasn't there, it would have been hard for me to make a move. So they've been building the product out. We're fully integrated with, basically all the platforms out there, SOC 2 compliant. They've done partnerships. So they're partnered with many softwares out in the space already today. And now we're going to market with direct to business. So small sales team, focused on, I'll be overseeing the SFR side, also multifamily throughout the Midwest. But our product, we think it's a game changer, right? It starts with the screening. So ID, right? We can screen up to folks from about 216 different countries, right? To open up the flow, get some good information coming in. We then do the biometric, right? You got to look in the camera, right? Screen it, make sure it matches to their ID. We work with multiple bank partners, like MX being one of them. So we serve up about 97, 98% of all banks. So there's a lot of bank uploads. You're getting a lot of real good data from actual history of what your prospective tenant, has been doing. You can tag the dollar amount of what they paid in rent. We can pull that out. We can show if they're paying on time, how many NSFs. You can see stuff like pets, right? We all know, going back to my days of managing property, I don't have a pet, but then you got a pet, right? You're not putting on the application. And so we can show, oh, hey, there's a charge from Chewy or BarkBox or Petco. And so all of a sudden you're like, I don't have a pet. Like, why are you spending $80 a month at Petco? So we can help out operators see that. In terms of the fraud mitigation, we've been proven out to a lot of our operators to have net zero new delinquencies, right? So we're pulling all those fraudulent folks out. Our data will show that like your first month of coming on board with us, you're going to have an 8 to 10% abandonment rate because these people that are in the fraud business start seeing VeriFast and they know they can't get through it. So they pull out of the cycle. After about 30 days, that's down to like less than 1% of abandonment rate. And we fully work with within your flow. Like, what do you want to put in there? Are you allowing offer letters? Are you allowing pay stubs? Right? Well, you can upload all that. So we're pretty flexible. And we let the client determine what they want. And then at the end of the day, we're looking for proof of like living in a lot of these accounts, because even today, a fraudster can go and set up a real company. They can get real payroll flowing through ADP. They could heat up a fake profile, right, of a person paying that same amount every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. We want to go ahead and make sure that money's flowing back out into real life stuff, groceries, gas, your Ubers, your Lyfts. Like, we're going to go ahead and look for that stuff to validate as well. So we're seeing, by doing all that and then also allowing multiple payment sources from like gig economy, your Cash Apps, your Chime, your Venmos, we can pull all that in to get a real holistic view of what the residents, compensation looks like. And we can pull that forward for the residents. So we think a lot of those combinations helps us accelerate the leasing funnel. More people getting approved is really what we're focused on, but we have really good AI and the back end, the metadata that will capture the fraud. And so we're mitigating a ton of fraud and have some white papers out of some companies that have increased, 3, 4, 5% occupancy and gone from a couple $100,000 in debt per multifamily community down to zero net new since taking on VeriFast and using our screening process.
How does this work in tandem with the property accounting software, which is notoriously a little skittish about allowing other screening alternatives to butt into that subset of their revenue in their business?
Yeah. So, I'm still kind of new in seat, like learning all that stuff, but we do have a good amount of integrations already in place with a lot of the big software players. We do have some workarounds that look and feel like an integration, but I wouldn't call it like a direct integration where, we kind of get notified that residents, selects the application button, it triggers something on our end to get them the link, right, and the information over to them. We manage all that information, then we push that back into a software system. Each one, right, being different. Like I said, some direct integrations, some workarounds, but really we're taking all the work out of the hands of our operators who we're selling to.
The whole approach of screening, one of the things that I've noticed in conversation is that there's a lot of complexity. It's becoming a surface area for more regulatory scrutiny in terms of how you're conducting the screening, whether or not it's fair, disparate impact, etc. What are you anticipating and what are you seeing in terms of specifically regulatory changes that may impact how screening can be done over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I said on a panel earlier today at the IMN event, and they were talking about like AI and biases. And I do think like when you think about screening folks and, having a leasing agent, either look at a photo or see where someone currently lives or where they work, right? There could be bias, like, unjudged bias that just lives in people's heads. And they're like, oh, this is not the person I want to rent to for whatever reason being. I think like by using a company like ours, right, we're giving you just the pure data, right? It's based upon a decision. As an operator, right, you can choose to hide that person's photo, mitigate all that so it's not even there. So when your leasing agent or whoever is like making that final call, they're just specifically looking at data. So I don't know where the federal regulations will go, but I feel like our solution takes any takes a lot of risk out of it and takes any what's the word I'm looking for?
Bias.
Yeah, bias out of the whole process. So
this product offering that you're describing is targeting who? Is it targeting single family residential property managers as well?
Yeah, both single family, multifamily. Yeah, really any tenant that wants to apply for a unit or a home.
And the use case for them, or the case to be made, is simply just improving the quality of the tenant.
Yeah, I mean, making a better, I guess, improving the quality of the tenant that comes into their unit, right? Someone that should be able to afford the rent that they're applying for, right? And then making sure that there's just so much fraud. Like fraud is on such like an uptick nowadays, with technology, that mitigating the bad actors from coming in that, could be squatting, could be sitting, could be not paying rent for several months, making sure that doesn't happen to your community.
Is there any conversation internally at VeriFast around like fraud innovation, if you will? It seems like what I find so interesting is that in general, fraudsters are some of the most creative, capable people that you get the impression that if they were to point those ideas, thoughts, efforts, etc., towards something noble, they'd probably would have been able to make just as much money legally. Yeah. It's a really creative.
I think that's like on our calls when we talk through that, or listening to my seniors on the team that have been around for a while, selling the product. Like it's a common conversation is like, those people could be making so much more money in legit business, but they choose to sell off profiles for $300, $500 a pop. And if you go on Reddit or you go on to like Instagram, TikTok, like they're selling profiles, all this crazy stuff out there. You can even, like once they find a community, like they just start hammering in on it, or they find a management company. Like once they know they can get through your process, then they just lean in on
leaky bucket.
And that's where you start feeling the pain.
Yeah, fraud is definitely something we think about internally just with the software that we're developing. Anytime that there's a product surface area of something cool we could build that involves the potentiality of dealing with fraud, it's like, all right, think twice. Yeah. Is the juice worth the squeeze? The emotional toll of having to deal with fraud can be high.
Sure.
And what I hear you communicating is that the technology approach that is being taken here is largely just removing those considerations from the mix.
Yeah, I mean, I think you always got to be thinking about trying to be one step ahead of that fraudster, right? I mean, there's been some solutions out there that came out, years back that thought was the end all be all, but then those fraudsters get ahead of it, and that technology comes obsolete and allows for companies like VeriFast to come in and become a new solution, right? And so we're constantly thinking about that, and we're not just in the tenant, right, screening space. Like we're also in the mortgage space, we're also in the automotive space. So like as a company, this just isn't the only vertical we're in. So we're like hyper focused in on making sure that our screening is like lock solid.
So you've been in the industry for a while, but you've done a bunch of different things. Mm-hmm. What keeps you motivated to keep learning? And even in this jump right here, I mean, you had some familiarity with screening, obviously, but this is new surface area, new stuff to learn.
Lot to still learn. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I feel like you can just spend so much time on everything property management related. And maybe it's just the older that I get, like the more dialed in I am. When you're young, you're just kind of out there doing it, and you can kind of get by just working hard. As you get more senior or older, like myself, more gray hairs, you got to keep evolving, keep understanding, talking to people. So I don't know. I guess I'm just more personally interested in the space and trying to be an expert in as many things I can be an expert in.
What's the number one piece of advice you would provide somebody early in a sales career?
I think one of the things that really benefited me early on was I would go try to find, and I was at a bigger company within classified ventures with apartments.com and cars.com, but I would try to go find someone on the leadership team, and I'd ask them to go to lunch, and I'd say, like, give me one, like, what's the best piece of advice someone ever gave you? What's the best book you've ever read? And like, what's the noise you hear about me, right? Like what's my brand? And I learned a few things about myself. Everyone thinks that like they're the best, so right? At least internally, you just think like what I do is right, and whatever else does might not be as right as I think it. But to hear someone give you praise, but also say like, I also hear this. I remember early on, someone told me like, oh, I hear like you're a bulldog. Like, and they were like trying to be in a positive way. And I was like the guy, like, all right, it's not 5 o'clock, like keep dialing, and I was like probably in my early 20s, and there's a gal in the industry that she'll laugh if she sees this, but she even messaged to me on her new job, and she's like, I appreciate you, hitting the horn. Like I would play like the Flintstones, like the Barney Rubble, like pull the, I'm like, everyone's dialing until the Barney Rubble, horn goes off. But at that point, early on, I realized like it's a lot better to people that they want to go through the wall for you than like making them go through the wall for you, right? And so luckily I learned that in like my early 20s, and since then like that was probably one of the more humbling experiences that I had. And I was like, all right, then I tried to be more of a servant leader and tried to be one of the team. And I'm not opposed to, I'd never ask someone to do something that I hadn't done or wasn't willing to go do myself again, right, in that point or time. So that, I guess, like, long story short, go back, find someone that's been around, ask them a couple of those questions, see what you get back, and I think that'll be beneficial. So
my parting question to you is this: as we gear up to do some surveying of the self-managing landlord market, I'm asking leaders in the industry, if you could ask every self-managing landlord in America one question, what would it be?
I know why you're doing it, right? It's because it's usually like a cost thing, right? In their mind, it's like, I can do this and save the cost. But why? Like, what? Like, why not hand it over to a professional that's in the space, that knows the day-to-day and takes all of that off of your plate? You know what I mean? Like, what? Like, why are you not willing to give up a couple bucks if you're going to look at this as a long-term thing, to let someone manage it for you?
That is the question.
Yeah.
Why?
Right. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. So.
All good, man. Thanks for coming on and sharing your experience and your story, Bob.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Until next time.
Yeah, man. Awesome.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. You can check out other episodes along the way. If you're watching this on YouTube, appreciate a subscribe. Any comments, I'm always here to engage. If you're listening on an audio platform, would really appreciate a review. It's a great way to help other people find out about the show.